Bruchim Habayim, welcome everyone. We're excited. We're starting Chelek Gimel of Mishna Berura with Dirshu HaOlami of Daf Hayomi Ba'alacha. So Bruchim Habayim to everyone that's joining today, this wonderful, life-changing program. Today's learning is sponsored for Refuah Shlema of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid. Upcoming surgery, Be'ezrat Hashem, should be with Refuah Shlema of Yitzchak Iman Ben Eliza of Refuah Shlema. Learning has also been dedicated by the Dayan family, Cohen family, and by Shea family. Should be tremendous bracha and Yeshua for their families. Amen. So we are starting the Chelek Gimel of Shulchan Aruch Mishna Berura, which is primarily Hilchot Shabbat, and like the Chafetz Chaim writes in his preface to Mishna Berura Chelek Gimel, so if you don't constantly study Hilchot Shabbat, if you don't go through them thoroughly and properly, you are most definitely going to be Mechalel Shabbat. If you don't know the intricacies of Hilchot Shabbat, especially when it comes to Halachot of Borer, things that are detailed and nuanced, if a person does not know them, it's impossible to keep Shabbat properly. So that being said, we're going to try to keep up with the pace of the Dirshu HaOlami of Daf Hayomi Ba'alacha, Siman Resh Mem Bet, Leizaher B'chvot Shabbat, to be careful with Kavod Shabbat, with preparations of Shabbat, going into this amazing day of rest, of Shabbat. Afilu mish sarich la'acherim. Im yesh lo me'at mishelo sarich lezarez atzmo lechabed Shabbat. Even a person that needs others to help him, even if he has just a little bit of finances that could support Onek Shabbat, sarich lezarez atzmo lechabed Shabbat. He should, with alacrity, push himself to respect Shabbat. ולא אמרו עשה שבתך חול ואל תשתרך לבריות אלא למי שהשעת חוקה לו. The concept that the Gemara discusses in Masechet Pesachim towards the end, in Daf Kuf Yud Bet, that the Gemara there says you should make your Shabbat chol. Don't respect the Shabbat as much. Deal with it as a Yom Chol, as a regular mundane day. Ve'al tistarech labriot, and don't have to ask for help from people. Says the Shulchan Aruch, that's only misha asha'ad dechukalo, that a person that has extensive needs, that's what it's talking about. Al ken sarich letzamsem b'sha'ar yamim kedei lechabed et haShabbat. Therefore, a person should, if possible, minimize his expenditure on weekdays to be able to save up kedei lechabed et Shabbat, to make Shabbat special. Now, the Misal Sharim says that this is not just making Shabbat special, but he brings from the Tanaim and Amoraim who were exercising in Midat Chasidut to make Shabbat, to make regular weekdays even lower than normal, that they would wear shchorim. Back then, in the time of Chazal, wearing black was not necessarily considered very formal, was considered something that was a Siman of Avelut. It was not necessarily something looked up to. So they would wear like darker clothing, simpler clothing, not as fancy, not as respectful during the week. This way, when on Shabbat they wore something really nice, you saw the contrast clearly. And that also, says the Mislat Shanim, is part of Kavod Shabbat, to make Shabbat special. Mitakanat Ezra Sofer, like the Gemara says in Baba Kama, and Daf Pei Bet, Daf Pei Aleph, and Pei Bet is Takanat Yeshua, Takanat Ezra. Ezra Sofer made multiple takanot, and one of them was, in order to respect Shabbat, to prohibit washing clothing, doing laundry on Friday. First of all, laundry back in the day was a whole day's job. You had to schlep everything to the river, to the source of water, sit there, scrub everything, squeeze everything, shake off everything, schlep back the heavy laundry, wet laundry, and make ropes and put it on ropes and dry it. it was a whole day's job. If you leave that to Friday, you're either not going to end up doing it and you're going to have dirty clothing for Shabbat, or if you do it, you don't get any other time to properly respect Shabbat of doing things that need to be done for Shabbat, for Kavod Shabbat. So therefore, Thursday you should do laundry. You should do laundry Thursday. This way you will definitely have clean clothing for Shabbat, and it will not be last minute to leave it for Friday to take away from other preparations for Shabbat. And says the Ramah, part of the Kavod Shabbat is the minhag of ladies to knead the dough and create their own challah and do it big enough of a shiur of a dough that becomes chayav bechallah. According to Chabad, that would be 1.66 kilograms of flour that you make to dough, and that would be sufficient for separating challah. According to Ben Ish Chai, is going to be a larger amount, but this is part of Kavod Shabbat, that a person should make their own lechem, their own challah, their own bread, lipso alehim b'Shabbat v'yom tov, fresh challah, home baked, and this has more deeper layers of concepts relating to Adam Arishon and Chava, that Chava and Erev Shabbat caused the demise, so to speak, of Adam Arishon and herself and the generations to come. The original sin, so to speak, was done on Erev Shabbat, and hence the takana of that, because Adam was chalato shel olam. So Chazal say, because she turned off nero shel olam and she destroyed chalato shel olam to create ner on Erev Shabbat, that this was mitzvah of woman, and chala on Erev Shabbat, which is also mitzvah of woman, right? This is chana, is the Rashi Tevot of the mitzvot that are specific for women, that are a tremendous chut, is chala, nida, and hadlakat nerot. Chana, right? Chala, nida, and hadlakat nerot. And two of those is Erev Shabbat, is the commemoration, so to speak, of the original Erev Shabbat, that these happened, and therefore she lights the ner, she separates the challah as part of the Kavod Shabbat as well. Ve'en leshanot, and that's the minhag. Vehu michvot Shabbat, says the Ramah, that is considered from the items of Kavod Shabbat and Yom Tov to make the challah at home. Ve'en leshanot, that minhag is not to be changed. It's an important minhag. Yesh shekatvu shebemiktzat mekomot nahagu lechol muliat ashkorin pashtida b'leil Shabbat. There are those places that have a minhag to eat pashtida. What's pashtida? It is basically, it's like knishes, meat knish, potato knish that we have. The concept is that meat or potatoes are covered from bottom and from the top with the dough, and the minhag of having pashtida on Shabbat is zecher leman, because man also was covered from top and the bottom with layers of dew, and the man was sandwiched in the middle, so you have this sandwich-like thing to commemorate eating man. So this whole thing of the meat knishes and potato knishes that we have is not just something that's delicious, which it is, but it is also a deeper sense of commemorating what man was on Friday night, on Shabbat. And says the Ramah, "Velo ra'iti lachosh laze." I haven't seen this as a minhag that many people are very specific about, but it is nevertheless a minhag that exists. Now, this is the Seif Aleph in the Shulchan Aruch, and in the Ramah, the Chafetz Chaim writes in Mishna Berura that mitzvat onek Shabbat, we have it in the Nevi'im. There are those who say mitzvah of onek Shabbat is midoraita, midivrei Kabbalah, or midoraita. Karat al Shabbat oneg is a pasuk in Navi, so that would be midivrei Kabbalah, and there are those who learn it actually as a mitzvah deoraita as well. But the Mishnah Berura says that this is midivrei hanevi'im from the pasuk of Karat al Shabbat oneg, and yesh poskim shesivira lahu ikaro hu min Torah, because Shabbat hu bichlal mikrai kodesh. When it says mikrai kodesh, right, rishon hu le mikrai kodesh, Shabbat is the first one of days that are called Mikra Kodesh, and therefore it says Ubayom HaShevi'i Shabbat Shabbaton Mikra Kodesh. Mikra Kodesh, the Sifra Chazal in Sifra explain, means lekadesho l'chabedo, to sanctify Shabbat, to respect Shabbat, b'ksut nikia, with beautiful and clean clothing, and to pleasure yourself with the proper food and drinks that a person enjoys. And the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Kuf Yud Chet, in a tremendous way, pushes this concept that the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbat is so great and so important that the person that properly enjoys Shabbat, notlino nachala belo mesarim, says the Gemara. They give you a portion, an inheritance without boundaries, a bracha, that endless bracha comes on a person, and he is going to be nitzol mishibud malchuyot. He is going to be saved from anti-Semitism and from shibud malchuyot. I guess you could translate it like that nowadays. From the difficulties of galut, and he will merit financial blessing of ashirut. Tremendous things. The Gemara says a whole Amud basically, and Daf Kuf Yud Chet, that discusses this inyan, and the gather of this mitzvah are three different ma'amarei Chazal that the Chafetz Chaim points out. One is that it's brought in the Gemara actually to have fish as Oneg Shabbat on Shabbat, right? Dagim gedolim, shumin tafshil shel teradin. That was considered in time of Chazal a very delightful delicacy, important food. V'chen bechol makom makom. Says the Chafetz Chaim is not an objective halakha. This is very subjective. Depends on what you enjoy, what your time and place enjoys, and that becomes part of enjoying Shabbat with proper food and drinks. The second one is what Chazal say, that even if you do a small thing for Shabbat, kiyem mitzvat oneg Shabbat, with that you have established the mitzvah of oneg Shabbat, even kasad harsana, the Gemara says in Pesachim. Even if you have just the most simple extra food of kasad harsana, was a dish made with fish and other things, a small fish, not something important, but even that is considered oneg Shabbat, to have an additional dish on Shabbat. And the third one is what Rabbi Akiva says, Aseh Shabbatcha chol v'al tistarech labriot. Says, even if you have to work on Shabbat, so to speak, deal with it as a mundane time, still you should push not to need to stick your hand in front of people and get tzedakah, right? So talking about a person that can't afford delicacies of life, how much do you go out of your way to be ma'aneg the Shabbat? Do you go on loans, borrow money? Do you go and stick your hand for tzedakah to be able to enjoy Shabbat? What's the limit? We know it's important, but what's the limit? So says the Chafetz Chaim, Chiluk kol elu hamamarim hu beofen zeh. This is how you understand these three Gemarot and put them together as one unit that makes sense. Says the Chafetz Chaim, someone that has the financial ability should do the best that he could to enjoy Shabbat in a phenomenal, special way. And someone that has very difficult financial time, he only has the food for two seudot on Shabbat. That's all he could afford. Food for 2 seudot on Shabbat. Now, parenthesis here, 2 seudot of Shabbat is absolute obligation. Sudah Shlishit is machloket. Maran holds that it's chiyuv, right? Maran shcharuch. So therefore, it's important to have Sudah Shlishit with bread. But at the same time, because of the machloket, if you forgot to say retzev, for instance, in Sudah Shlishit, you don't go back. right? It becomes a little bit of a machloket, kafachayim, chamobadia, but 2 of the seudot is an absolute must. So if a person could only afford mazon lishte seudot, on that Rabbi Akiva says, suffice with that. Suffice with that, you have the bare minimum that's necessary for Shabbat, and better to act like Shabbat is a regular day and abstain from having delicacies and so on and so forth, if that would require you to stick your hand to get tzedakah. Don't do that. Aseh Shabbat chachol v'al tistarech lebriot. Don't use people. There's a value to be had for a person to keep their dignity and not get used to getting tzedakah. So therefore, says Rabbi Akiva, 2 seudot you have, enough. Ve'eno mechuyav lo b'shlosh seudot. You're not mechuyav to have a 3rd seudah. Ve'lo be'kasa deharsana. You don't even have to have an extra small dish like a kasa deharsana, this simple fish dish that we mentioned. Nothing. 2 seudot you have, suffice with that. That's the Gemara with Rabbi Akiva. But if a person is really pressed financially, right? ומי שיש לו ממון כדי לקנות מזה מזון 3 סעודות ויותר מזה קצת. If you have more money than 2 סעודות, you could have 3 סעודות and a little bit more. מחויב להוציא אותן על שבת. You spend that money on Shabbat, 3 סעודות and a kasa deharsana, another extra little bit. כדי שיקיים 3 סעודות וכasa deharsana. You will have that bare minimum. והוא הדין, and this is the chidush. והוא הדין מי שאין לו כלום. If someone doesn't have anything, he doesn't even have mazon shte seudot. He only has food for 1 seuda, or he has nothing. That person, והוא מוטל הכל על הצדקה. He's completely dependent on the tzedakah of the tzibur. הרי הגבאים מחויבים ליתן לו 3 סעודות וכסה דהרסנה על כל פנים. The minimum that the tzibur is mechuyav, is obligated to provide for him, and he should be open to doing that, is 3 seudot plus a kasa deharsana. That means you don't say, well, the minimum is 2 seudas, right? No. Here, once he already needs the tzibur, we support him properly to have the bare minimum of 3 seudot of Shabbat and a little onek Shabbat. You're not going to give him steak and ribs, but kasa deharsana, a little extra, and 3 seudot. So someone that doesn't need tzedakah because he has the bare minimum of 2 seudot, we tell him don't get tzedakah. Suffice with what you have. Right? It's like a middle class always suffers. That's what it is, right? But someone that already is needing tzedakah, so now you could have him have a proper 3 seudot plus onek Shabbat of minimum portions of kasa deharsana. Now, u'ba'adam nichbat, if a person was a rich individual, was a high-standing individual in the community, and then he unfortunately experienced a difficulty in his parnasah, bankrupt, whatever it is, then hakol lefi kevodo. We support him and his family based on the hilchot tzedakah. Hilchot tzedakah would require that at least for the while being, until things are normalized for him or he gets used to the situation, he should be supported based on what he had before. So we don't give him bare minimum. We give him based on his dignity that he had in the community to make sure that that dignity is preserved and he's not going to shatter his emotional and his communal standing should not be shattered with the financial difficulty that he's experiencing. So that's gets into Hilchot Tzedakah, not for now necessarily, but that is an important part as well. Now, says the Mishnah Berura, you should be careful, lechatchila, not to have less than 2 foods for Shabbat. When you say lechabed Shabbat, you want to have an extra portion. So normally you have 1 food, and Shabbat you want to have 2 foods, right? That's why people you see they're in different courses, of first they bring the fish, and then they sing, then bring other things, right? Gam tov sheyochal bechol seudah mishlosh seudot dagim. It's also good to have fish in every seudah of the 3 seudot, if possible, right? The reason that in Seudah Shlishit you find a lot of tuna fish is not just random, is because of this halacha to try to have fish as a delicacy in each one of the sudas. Now, if fish doesn't agree with them, they don't like fish, the Marsha, Ran in Nedarim, and Shagatari say you don't have to, even for Yom Tov, it's oneg Yom Tov, that's basar v'yayin. If yayin doesn't agree with you, even though the Shulchan Aruch says you're supposed to have wine, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to push it, and you could have things that are enjoyable, but again, have something extra. You have normally one dish, one course. You should have an extra dish l'chatchila for Shabbat, and this becomes actually something that Goyim used to take advantage of, to jack up the prices of fish because on Friday, because they knew Jews under any circumstance they're going to pay whatever it is for Kavod Shabbat, and this becomes a halachic debate. And the halacha is the Bedin could get together and make a ban, a temporary ban on buying fish. Asur, you can't. Even if you're rich, you're a billionaire, you're not allowed to buy fish. They basically destroyed the black market in this way, putting a cap on inflation and abuse, so to speak, of this halacha by goyim or by Jews even, to charge people, because and the takana is not because we're saving money. The takana is because we want everyone to be able to be doing oneg Shabbat, and the aniyim or middle class cannot really afford it if the prices are jacked up. So therefore, we bring it down, and those are parts of the jobs of the bedin. The leading figures in every Jewish community, to see to it that happens, that people could all enjoy Shabbat equally, even the people who are not of high financial means. And Kedei Lechabed et Shabbat, says the Shulchan Aruch, that you even minimize your experience of other 6 days in order to be able to splurge a little bit on Shabbat. The memezonot shel Shabbat v'Yom Tov im mosif mosifin lo. On Shabbat, if you spend more, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you more. This is a Gemara in Masechet Betzat of Tet Zayin Amud Aleph, the first line of the Gemara. That kol mezonotav shel Adam ketzuvot lo min Rosh Hashanah v'ad Yom HaKippurim. Our Gisha is chutz mihotzaot Shabbatot Yomim Tovim. One of the exceptions to the rule of set parnasah from Rosh Hashanah is hotzaot Shabbat v'Yom Tov. That when you add to it, the Gemara says kosher mosif mosifin lo. If you spend more, Hashem gives you more parnasah. It doesn't count that addition. Now Rambam, it's important parenthesis, Rambam in Chod Yom Tov, when bringing this psak from the Gemara, says kifi mamono. He adds very wisely and subtly, he adds two words. Says kifi mamono, which means if you're not a high income, if you go and buy $2,000 worth of steak for every Seudah of Yom Tov, that's not what the Gemara says. You're pushing your limits, but it's within means. Still within means. You have to be a responsible person. It's not that it's a miracle that you do and the money falls from this. No, Hashem adds, but it is a miracle. Everything is a miracle, but it's a subtle miracle. So you add a little bit, you're pushing your limits, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu pushes your limits to give more, and that's really what we're talking about. Over here, one last piece over here, Kedesh Ur Chala, this is to make challah on Shabbat with the dough and so on, that the Mishnah Berura discusses. Well, one piece we skipped. The laundry, the takana v'ezra to do laundry on Thursdays, says the Mishnah Berura, Hainu kadesh yu levanim l'Shabbat. One element is you want to make sure you have clean pressed clothing for Shabbat. That's one element. And the second element is you don't want to be busy, not to be able to have time for other kavod Shabbat. Aval lo be'erev Shabbat. But you shouldn't do it on Erev Shabbat kadesh yu penuim le'asek b'sorchei Shabbat. So you have to do it on Thursday because you want to have clean pressed clothing, but don't do it on Friday because then you're going to not have enough time to take care of the Sorchei Shabbat. If he says tarech lizahar shlo lelech bechaluk echad kama Shabbatot kedei shlo la'avor takanot Ezra. So therefore, you even if you have a Shabbat clothing, you want to wash it every week. You want it to be clean. That's part of takanat Ezra. It's not just don't do it on Friday, but it's also do it on Thursday. You want to make sure you have clean pressed clothing for Shabbat, which really opens the door to the discussion of, we can have that tomorrow, Be'ezrat Hashem, of what exactly is the halacha nowadays. Nowadays, we don't have to go to the river. You just dump everything in the washing machine, you push a button, you go do your things, and you come back when he plays the melody for you that it's finished, right? And you just take it from there, dump it in the dryer, you push another button, and he sings and dances for you after it's done. So the whole involvement is like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So maybe that should be mutar, or do we say that no, once it's a takana, lechatchila, you should still keep the takana? That's something we'll discuss, Be'ezrat Hashem. And the last piece of today's Amud is Kedei Shiur Chala. Explains the Chafetz Chaim, there are two elements here. One is that the kneading and the baking is part of Kavod Shabbat, V'yom Tov, like it says at the end, right? But it's another reason for it also. You're doing a mitzvah of challah. So one is to have fresh baked, home baked bread for Shabbat. That's part of Kavod Shabbat, to have fresh challah. But it's not only that. It is also the fact that you're doing mitzvat challah. So you do a little bit bigger dough to do hafrashat challah, lefish ibda et ha'adam harishon, because of what we said when we ran the Ramah, because Chava, part of the sin, the original sin was, she destroyed the chalato shel olam, which was Adam harishon, shaya chalato shel olam, shenivra be'erev Shabbat, ve'ayin ba'achronim da'afilu anohagim lechol pat palter, even those who don't, they're not very specific about Pat Yisrael during the weekdays, says the Mishna Berura, mikol makom beShabbat v'Yom Tov nachon leizaher shelo le'chol kim mipat Yisrael. On Shabbat and Yom Tov, you should go the extra mile to make sure you to buy Pat Yisrael. Nowadays, Baruch Hashem, we're blessed to have a lot of bakeries. All of them are Pat Yisrael. Don't buy from Trader Joe's, whatever it is, things that may not be Pat Yisrael. You want to have something that is considered properly baked by a Yid, Pat Yisrael, mipenei kavod Shabbat. That is for part of the Kavod Shabbat as well, to have an extra level of kashrut, that it should be Pat Yisrael. Upashut deimhu anus. But if you're anus, if you don't have the option, you don't have any other thing, the only thing you have is Pat Palter, that's not Pat Yisrael, of course that would be still mutar. Again, it says people in the army and so on and so forth. Many times you don't have an option, or you're in towns that all you got is Trader Joe's. It's kosher bread, of course, right? But it's not Pat Yisrael, it's Pat Palter. So if that's the situation, of course it could be mekel. But for the rest of us, that we have the option of buying from bakeries, the Jewish bakeries and so on, that is something that's considered part of Kavod Shabbat as well. And Be'ezrat Hashem will continue on Seif Bet in the days to come. Chazak u'baruch.